Evan never expected that losing his job would be the smallest problem in his life. What really shattered him was the look in Brianna's eyes, the kind that said he wasn't just struggling, he was worthless. She mocked him, called him a failure, and acted like his entire future had already collapsed. But what she didn't know was that Evan had been quietly building a startup on the side, a company growing faster than anyone realized. And right as he was preparing for the most important deal of his life, Brianna posted a public rant calling him a man who would never level up. Within hours, her words spread online like wildfire, exposing not just her cruelty, but the fault line in their relationship that had been building for years. And once that line cracked, everything else came crashing down. Brianna's attitude toward Evan had been changing long before the day she posted that cruel status. At first it was subtle, just small comments slipped into conversations, teasing him about how long he was taking to figure things out. But as the weeks went by, those comments sharpened into clear contempt. Whenever Evan mentioned applying for new roles or improving his skills, she would roll her eyes and say things like, "You've been saying that for months." She started comparing him to her coworkers, pointing out how quickly they were moving up in their careers while he was stuck in the same place. Evan tried to brush it off, telling himself she was just stressed or frustrated. But deep down, every remark chipped away at the warmth they used to share. What made the situation worse was that he couldn't tell her the truth about what he was working on. His startup was still in a delicate phase, and revealing anything too early could jeopardize the negotiations he and his small team were preparing for. So he kept it quiet, every late-night call with suppliers, every meeting with potential partners, every milestone they reached behind the scenes. To Brianna, all of it looked like he was just wasting time, playing entrepreneur instead of getting a real job. And she didn't hesitate to remind him of that. One evening, after Evan mentioned a technical issue he was dealing with in the startup, she snapped and said, "Maybe if you put half that effort into finding actual work, we wouldn't be in this mess." He stared at her, stunned by the bitterness in her voice. But instead of defending himself, he stayed silent, afraid that revealing the truth would raise questions he wasn't ready to answer. The tension kept building. Arguments became routine, and each one ended with Brianna storming out, muttering that she didn't want to babysit a grown man. Evan felt trapped between protecting his project and trying to salvage their relationship. He convinced himself that once the deal was finalized, everything would make sense and Brianna would finally understand what he had been fighting for. But that hope vanished the day she posted her infamous status. It happened after a small argument, one that shouldn't have mattered. Brianna was frustrated that he couldn't attend a dinner with her friends because he had an important virtual meeting. Evan apologized and promised to make it up to her, but she exploded, accusing him of using imaginary work as an excuse. That night, she grabbed her phone and typed out the message that would push everything over the edge. "Some people just don't know how to level up. No ambition, no drive, no future. I'm done waiting for a miracle." Evan read the post in disbelief, shocked not just by her words, but by the fact that she had made their conflict public. Friends, coworkers, acquaintances, everyone saw it. And while some defended her, others questioned why she would humiliate her partner like that. Evan felt a cold clarity settle in. He finally realized the truth he had been avoiding. Brianna didn't lose patience with him. She lost respect for him. And once respect was gone, nothing could save what they had. The morning after Brianna's post began to circulate, Evan was already on his way to a downtown office building for the meeting that could change his entire life. He barely slept, not because of her words, but because his team had finalized the last documents for the acquisition proposal. For months, they had been negotiating with a major manufacturer interested in absorbing their HVAC optimization technology. Now, everything was ready for the final discussion. Evan walked into the boardroom feeling a familiar mix of excitement and fear, the kind that comes right before everything either falls apart or falls into place. His partners greeted him with firm handshakes, and the representatives from the acquiring company wasted no time diving into the details. They reviewed projected revenue, integration plans, and expansion opportunities. Evan presented updates confidently, hiding the emotional chaos he had left at home. To the people in that room, he wasn't a struggling ex-employee. He was a promising founder, on the verge of a multi-million-dollar deal. Just when they paused for a short break, one of the junior analysts glanced at his phone and frowned. He whispered something to his colleague, who then leaned over to show their manager. Evan didn't think much of it until the manager looked up at him with a strange expression, sympathy mixed with curiosity. The analyst hesitated, then said, Evan, I think you might want to see this." He turned his phone toward Evan. There it was. Brianna's rant, screenshot, reposted, and now gaining traction across several platforms. People were debating in the comments, speculating about who she was talking about, some even attacking the mystery boyfriend for being a failure. Others criticized her for publicly shamming a partner. The post had turned into a small wildfire, and Evan was right in the center of it. His stomach tightened, but he forced himself to stay composed. He simply said, "Personal issue, it's handled." The team nodded, respectful enough not to pry, and the meeting resumed. Yet the moment lingered. It wasn't embarrassment that bothered him. It was the sudden realization of how deeply Brianna underestimated him. While she was busy mocking him online, he was sitting in a room negotiating a deal that could rewrite his entire future. As the meeting continued, the acquiring company's lead attorney slid a thick folder across the table. Inside was the proposed contract. The headline number stared back at Evan, $3.2 million. He felt the breath catch in his throat. Months of stress, sacrifice, late nights, and silent endurance had brought him to this exact moment. And the irony wasn't lost on him. At the same time, Brianna was calling him a man who would never level up. He was inches away from closing a deal most people only dream of. By the end of the meeting, the representatives shook his hand and confirmed they were ready to move forward pending final signatures. His team celebrated quietly, but Evan only felt a calm, steady relief. The journey wasn't over yet, but the hardest part was behind them. Outside the building, his phone buzzed with notifications, messages from friends asking if he had seen Brianna's post, coworkers forwarding him screenshots, and even a few strangers tagging his name speculating if he was the failed boyfriend. He powered off his phone. There would be time to deal with all that later. For now, he had a future to secure. Evan arrived home late that evening, drained from the long negotiations and the emotional weight of the day. The apartment was silent, but not in a peaceful way. There was tension in the air, a heaviness that made every step feel deliberate. He didn't bother turning on the lights. He walked straight to the bedroom, grabbed the small suitcase he kept in the closet, and began packing. He moved quietly, methodically, as if following a plan he had rehearsed in his mind long before this moment. Shirts. A few pairs of jeans. His important documents. The essentials. Nothing else mattered anymore. He realized he had spent more time protecting Brianna's feelings than protecting his own peace. And tonight that ended. By the time Brianna returned home, Evan was gone. His key was left neatly on the kitchen counter. His phone was turned off. His car was nowhere in sight. The realization hit her immediately. Within minutes, she was calling him nonstop. 10 calls. 20. 30. By the time she hit 70, her voice in the voicemails had changed from irritation to panic. She demanded to know where he was. Then begged. Then cried. Evan didn't hear any of it. He was already staying at his brother's spare room across town, finally breathing in a quiet space that didn't judge him. The next morning, Brianna drove to his mother's house, pounding on the door and insisting she needed to talk to Evan. His mother calmly told her he wasn't there and closed the door, but Brianna didn't back down. She waited outside in her car for nearly an hour before giving up. Then she went to his old workplace, storming into the lobby and telling the receptionist that Evan was emotionally unstable and needed help. The staff looked at her like she was unhinged. They informed her he no longer worked there and asked her to leave. But Brianna's desperation only escalated. She reached out to Evan's closest friends, trying to guilt them into revealing where he was staying. When they refused, she started spinning stories, claiming he was depressed, that he might hurt himself, that she was the only one who could save him. No one believed her. Her behavior was too frantic, too inconsistent. She even went as far as creating a fake social media account to message one of Evan's business partners, hoping to extract information. When that didn't work, she began monitoring the online activity of his friends, waiting to see if anyone posted a location she could trace. It became an obsession. She couldn't stand the idea that Evan had cut her out so completely, so suddenly. But Evan didn't waver. He needed distance. He needed clarity. And for the first time in a long time, he needed to put himself first. While Brianna spiraled trying to regain control, he focused on preparing for the final stages of the acquisition. He knew that returning to her, even for a moment, would drag him back into a cycle that had already drained him dry. And every time he thought of her post, those words meant to humiliate him, he felt the resolve in his chest harden. This separation wasn't temporary. It was necessary. And there was no going back. Brianna found out about the acquisition deal by accident, and the moment she did, everything inside her shifted. It happened when one of her coworkers mentioned seeing Evan's name in a business forum, discussing a multi-million-dollar startup purchase. At first she laughed, assuming it was someone else with the same name. But curiosity got the better of her, and she searched deeper. The more she read, the more her stomach twisted. There was no denying it. Evan's company was the one being acquired. The same project she had mocked for months. The same idea she claimed would never go anywhere. Suddenly, all the contempt she once felt evaporated, replaced by shock, panic, and a desperate calculation. Within an hour, she was texting him apologies. When he didn't reply, she sent longer ones, paragraph after paragraph spilling explanations, promises, and declarations that she always believed in him, even though her words online told a very different story. When he still didn't respond, she called. 20 times. 40 times. Her voicemails shifted from remorseful to frantic. She even tried showing up at his brother's place, having stalked his location through an old shared app she forgot to uninstall, but his brother refused to let her in. After exhausting apologies, she switched to bargaining. She said they could start fresh. She said she could change. She said they could build a future together, now that he was set financially. The moment the word financially slipped from her mouth, Evan hung up. That was all he needed to hear. But Brianna didn't stop. She began threatening legal action, telling him he owed her a share because she supported him through his lowest point. Evan forwarded the messages to his attorney. The response came swift and cold. Since they were never married, never lived in a legally recognized domestic partnership, and had no shared assets, Brianna had no claim to anything. In fact, her online post shamming him could have been grounds for him to pursue action against her, though Evan had no intention of doing so. When she received the legal notice outlining her lack of rights, she broke down completely. For days she didn't go to work, and when she finally showed up, her manager called her in for a meeting. Someone had forwarded the viral post to HR, pointing out the misinformation and inappropriate conduct. She was issued a formal reprimand for unprofessional behavior. Her reputation at work began to crumble, whispers following her down the hallways. Feeling cornered, she made one last attempt to regain control. She drove to Evan's mother's house with a bouquet of flowers, and a shaky apology speech rehearsed in her head. But when his mother opened the door, she simply said, "Brianna, please respect Evan's boundaries," and closed it again. Brianna stood frozen on the porch, humiliated and powerless. It was only then she realized the gravity of everything she had done. Her insults, her desperation, her manipulation. The man she once belittled was rising higher than she ever imagined, and she had already burned every bridge that led back to him. And for the first time, she understood a truth she had never faced before. Evan wasn't avoiding her. He was finally done with her. The day of the final signing arrived, and Evan woke up with a calmness he hadn't felt in years. There was no weight on his chest anymore, no voice doubting him from across the room. No judgment hanging over every decision he made. He put on a simple suit, straightened his tie, and headed to the glass tower downtown where the acquisition team was waiting. The lobby buzzed with the usual morning rush, but to Evan, the noise felt distant. Today wasn't just business. It was closure. The final contract lay on the long mahogany table, pages crisp, signatures missing only his. His partners smiled proudly as the acquiring executives congratulated him in advance. When he picked up the pen, a surge of emotion washed over him, months of exhaustion, sacrifice, and silence collapsing into one moment of triumph. With a firm stroke, he signed his name. Just like that, the deal was official. He was now a millionaire. A few handshakes later, the room burst into quiet celebration. His team exchanged relieved grins, and one of the executives offered to take everyone out for lunch. But Evan excused himself, needing a moment alone to breathe. He stepped out into the lobby, pulling in a slow breath. That's when he heard the sound of heels rushing across the marble floor. He didn't need to look to know who it was. Brianna's voice cracked through the air. "Evan, please just wait." She looked disheveled, eyes red, mascara smudged, hair hastily tied back. She must have been waiting outside, hopping to catch him. He didn't respond. He didn't even slow down. But she stepped directly in front of him, blocking his path. "Evan, I'm so sorry," she whispered, tears already welling up. "I didn't know. I didn't understand. I messed up, I know I did." He remained still, expression blank. She grabbed his sleeve desperately. "Please, just hear me out. We can fix this. We can start over. I'll sign anything you want. A prenup, whatever. I don't care about the money." He gently pulled his arm away. "You only showed up now," he said quietly. "Not when I was struggling, not when I needed support, only now." She shook her head fiercely. "That's not true. I panicked. I said things I didn't mean. I was scared. I don't want your money, I just want you." Her voice quivered on the last word. But Evan had spent weeks replaying every insult, every dismissive look, every moment she made him feel unworthy. He remembered the status she posted, the arrogance, the humiliation. And now this sudden devotion rang hollow. Too perfect. Too convenient. "I'm not the same person you talked down to," he said. "And you're not here for me. You're here for what you lost." She flinched as if he had struck her. "Evan, please." For a second, she reached out again, but he stepped back. There was nothing left to say. Without another word, he walked past her, leaving her standing alone in the center of the lobby, surrounded by people who pretended not to stare. She sank onto a bench, sobbing into her hands as Evan disappeared through the revolving doors. Outside, sunlight hit his face, warm and steady. For the first time in a long time, he felt free. The chapter with Brianna had officially ended, and his new life had already begun. In the weeks following the signing, Evan settled into a quieter rhythm of life, one built around rebuilding himself rather than escaping someone else. He rented a small but modern condo closer to his new office, furnished it simply, and spent his mornings planning the launch of his second startup. This time, he didn't have to hide anything. He didn't have to apologize for ambition. He didn't have to shrink himself to make someone else comfortable. He finally felt like he was living on his own terms. Meanwhile, Brianna tried to rewrite her image as quickly as she had torn it down. She deleted the viral post, issued a vague explanation about being emotionally overwhelmed, and flooded her social media with motivational quotes and photos of brunches with friends she barely spoke to. She wanted to look healed, composed, desirable. But the whispers never really stopped. At work, she noticed colleagues exchanging glances whenever she walked by, and the reprimand she received hung over her like a shadow. Still, she refused to accept that she had lost everything. Part of her clung to the belief that she could bounce back. A few months later, she began dating a wealthy real estate investor named Marcus. He was older, polished, and exactly the type of man she believed would restore her image. She poured herself into the relationship, dressing carefully for every date, curating her personality to match what she thought he wanted, laughing a little too loudly at his jokes. For a while it worked. But things shifted the night Marcus asked casually if she had ever dated anyone in the tech world. Brianna stiffened for just a moment, then said she used to date a guy who played around with HVAC stuff, trying to sound dismissive. Marcus pressed further. Was his name Evan Miller? She froze. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her an article about rising founders in the HVAC optimization industry. There was Evan, smiling confidently in a professional portrait, described as a young innovator building his second company after a multi-million-dollar exit. Brianna's throat went dry. Marcus studied her reaction for a long moment, then closed the article. I've heard the story, he said calmly. About what happened between you two. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He simply told her he didn't see a future with someone who tore people down when they were struggling. The relationship ended before dessert arrived. The next blow came a few weeks later, when Brianna started her new job at a corporate client she had been eager to work for. On her first day, she received the quarterly schedule. Her eyes moved down the list of internal presentations. Her heart nearly stopped. Evan's name was printed clearly beneath the title, Strategic Integration Review. Her new employer was a major client of Evan's second startup, and he would be leading their quarterly advisory meetings. Every 3 months, she'd be required to sit in a room and listen to him speak, polished, confident, respected, everything she once insisted he would never become. When the day of the first presentation arrived, she sat near the back of the conference room, praying he wouldn't notice her. Evan walked in with his team, calm and focused. He didn't glance her way, not even once. To him, she wasn't a threat, or a regret, or even a memory worth revisiting. She was simply irrelevant. And that hurt more than any harsh word ever could. As Evan outlined the company's roadmap, Brianna felt the weight of her decisions press against her chest. Every insult, every dig, every moment she chose pride over kindness. She realized too late that the man she'd dismissed was the man she should have cherished. But Evan wasn't thinking about her at all. He was thinking about the future, his future. One he had earned through quiet perseverance, not for revenge, but for the life he always deserved. The final resolution began quietly, with a sense of clarity settling over everyone involved. After all the turmoil, misunderstandings, and emotional confrontations, the characters finally reached a point where they could look at one another without the weight of resentment pressing down on their chests. The revelations that had once torn them apart now served as the foundation for rebuilding trust, though each person understood that healing would take time. There was no grand gesture or dramatic declaration, only honest conversations, sincere apologies, and a shared acknowledgement of the pain they had caused one another. As they prepared to move forward, they recognized that their journey had reshaped them in ways they hadn't expected. The conflicts had forced them to confront their own fears, desires, and blind spots, and the growth that followed felt both hard-earned and necessary. In the end, They chose a path defined not by the mistakes of the past, but by the possibility of a better future. It was a quiet but powerful closing chapter, marking an end and a beginning that felt genuinely deserved.